No. 40 on the motivations and authority of the Founding Fathers. Anti-Federalist? No. 40 is a compilation of articles. It was a common saying among many sensible men in Great Britain and Ireland in the time of the war that they doubted whether the great men of America, who had taken an active part in favor of independence, were influenced by pure patriotism, that it was not the love of their country they had so much at heart as their own private interest, that a thirst after dominion and power, and not to protect the oppressed from the oppressor, was the great operative principle that induced these men to oppose Britain so strenuously. This seemingly illiberal sentiment was, however, generally denied by the well-hearted and unsuspecting friends of American liberty in Europe, who could not suppose that men would engage in so noble a cause through such base motives. But alas, the truth of the sentiment is now indisputably confirmed. Facts are stubborn things, and these set the matter beyond controversy. The new Constitution and the conduct of its despotic advocates show that these men's doubts were really well-founded. Unparalleled duplicity. That men should oppose tyranny under a pretense of patriotism, that they might themselves become the tyrants. How does such villainy disgrace human nature? Ah, my fellow citizens, you have been strangely deceived indeed. When the wealthy of your own country assisted you to expel the foreign tyrant, only with a view to substitute themselves in his stead. But the members of the Federal Convention were men we've been all tried in the field of action, say some. They have fought for American liberty. Then the more to their shame be it said. Curse on the villain who protects virgin innocence only with a view that he may himself become the ravisher. So that if the assertion were true, it only turns to their disgrace. But as it happens, it is not truth, or at least only so in part. This was a scheme taken by the despots and their sycophants to bias the public mind in favor of the Constitution. For the convention was composed of a variety of characters. Ambitious men, Jesuits, Tories, lawyers, etc., formed the majority, whose similitude to each other consisted only in their determination to lord it over their fellow citizens. Like the rays that converging from every direction meet in a point, their sentiments and deliberations concentered in tyranny alone. They were unanimous in forming a government that should raise the fortunes and respectability of the well-born few, and oppress the plebeians. Philadelphiensis. Does our soil produce no more Washingtons? Is there none who would oppose the attempt to establish a government by force? Can we not call from the fields, the counters, the bar, and mechanics' shops, any more generals? Is our soil exhausted? And does anyone suppose that the Americans, like the Romans, will submit to an army merely because they have conquered a foreign enemy? Un-American. I revere the characters of some of the gentlemen that composed the convention at Philadelphia. Yet I think they were human, and subject to imposition and error, as well as the rest of mankind. You lost 8 or 10 years of your lives and labor by the last war, and you were left at last with your debts and encumbrances on you. And numbers of you were soon after the close of it, sued and harassed for them. Your persons have been put into a loathsome prison, and others of you have had your property sold for taxes, and sometimes for 1/10 of its former and actual value, and you now pay very grievous and heavy taxes, double and treble what you paid before the war. And should you adopt this new government, your taxes will be great, increased to support their servants and retainers, who will be multiplied upon you to keep you in obedience, and collect their duties, taxes, impositions, and excises. Some of you may say the rich men were virtuous in the last war. Yes, my countrymen, they had reason then to be so. Our liberty then was in dispute with a mighty and powerful tyrant, and it was for their interest to promote and carry on the opposition, as long as they could stay at home and send the common people into the field to fight their battles. After the war began, they could not with decency recede, for the sword and enemy were at the very entrance of their gates. The case is greatly altered now. You conquered the enemy, and the rich men now think to subdue you by their wiles and arts, or make you, or persuade you, to do it yourselves. Their aim, I perceive, is now to destroy that liberty which you set up as a reward for the blood and treasure you expended in the pursuit of and establishment of it. They well know that open force will not succeed at this time, and have chosen a safer method, by offering you a plan of a new federal government, contrived with great art, and shaded with obscurity, and recommended to you to adopt. Which if you do, their scheme is completed, the yoke is fixed on your necks, and you will be undone, perhaps forever, and your boasted liberty is but a sound farewell. Be wise, be watchful, guard yourselves against the dangers that are concealed in this plan of a new federal government. A farmer and planter. Make the best of this new government. Say it is composed of anything but inspiration. You ought to be extremely cautious, watchful, jealous of your liberty. For instead of securing your rights, you may lose them forever. If a wrong step be now made, the republic may be lost forever. If this new government will not come up to the expectation of the people, and they shall be disappointed, their liberty will be lost, and tyranny must and will arise. I repeat it again, and I beg gentlemen to consider that a wrong step made now will plunge us into misery, and our republic will be lost. It will be necessary for this Virginia ratifying convention to have a faithful historical detail of the facts that preceded the session of the Federal Convention, and the reasons that actuated its members in proposing an entire alteration of government, and to demonstrate the dangers that awaited us, if they were of such awful magnitude as to warrant a proposal so extremely perilous as this. I must assert that this convention has an absolute right to a thorough discovery of every circumstance relative to this great event. And here I would make this inquiry of those worthy characters who composed a part of the late Federal Convention. I am sure they were fully impressed with the necessity of forming a great consolidated government instead of a confederation. That this is a consolidated government is demonstrably clear, and the danger of such a government is, to my mind, very striking. I have the highest veneration for those gentlemen. But, sir, give me leave to demand, what right had they to say, "We, the people"? My political curiosity, exclusive of my anxious solicitude for the public welfare, leads me to ask, who authorized them to speak the language of "we, the people" instead of "we, the states"? States are the characteristics and the soul of a confederation. If the states be not the agents of this compact, it must be one great, consolidated, national government of the people of all the states. I have the highest respect for those gentlemen who formed the convention, and were some of them not here, I would express some testimonial of esteem for them. America had, on a former occasion, put the utmost confidence in them, a confidence which was well placed. And I am sure, sir, I would give up anything to them. I would cheerfully confide in them as my representatives. But, sir, on this great occasion, I would demand the cause of their conduct, even from that illustrious man who saved us by his valor. I would have a reason for his conduct. That they exceeded their power is perfectly clear. The Federal Convention ought to have amended the old system. For this purpose they were solely delegated. The object of their mission extended to no other consideration. You must, therefore, forgive the solicitation of one unworthy member to know what danger could have arisen under the present Confederation, and what are the causes of this proposal to change our government. Patrick Henry. What then are we to think of the motives and designs of those men who are urging the implicit and immediate adoption of the proposed government? Are they fearful that if you exercise your good sense and discernment, you will discover the massed aristocracy that they are attempting to smuggle upon you under the suspicious garb of republicanism? When we find that the principal agents in this business are the very men who fabricated the form of government, it certainly ought to be conclusive evidence of their invidious design to deprive us of our liberties. The circumstances attending this matter are such as should, in a peculiar manner, excite your suspicion. It might not be useless to take a review of some of them. In many of the states, particularly in this Pennsylvania and the northern states, there are aristocratic juntos of the well-horn few, who have been zealously endeavoring since the establishment of their constitutions to humble that offensive upstart, equal liberty. But all their efforts were unavailing. The ill-bred churl obstinately kept his assumed station. A comparison of the authority under which the convention acted and their form of government will show that they have despised their delegated power and assumed sovereignty, that they have entirely annihilated the old confederation and the particular governments of the several states, and instead thereof have established one general government that is to pervade the Union, constituted on the most unequal principles, destitute of accountability to its constituents, and as despotic in its nature as the Venetian aristocracy, a government that will give full scope to the magnificent designs of the Wellhorn, a government where tyranny may glut its vengeance on the low-born, unchecked by an odious Bill of Rights. And yet, as a blind upon the understandings of the people, they have continued the forms of the particular governments, and termed the whole a confederation of the United States, pursuant to the sentiments of that profound but corrupt politician Machiavel, who advises any one who would change the constitution of a state to keep as much as possible to the old forms. For then the people, seeing the same officers, the same formalities, courts of justice, and other outward appearances, are insensible of the alteration, and believe themselves in possession of their old government. Thus Caesar, when he seized the Roman liberties, caused himself to be chosen dictator, which was an ancient office, continued the Senate, the consuls, the tribunes, the censors, and all other offices and forms of the Commonwealth, and yet changed Rome from the most free to the most tyrannical government in the world. The late convention, in the majesty of its assumed omnipotence, have not even condescended to submit the plan of the new government to the confederation of the people, the true source of authority, but have called upon them by their several constitutions to assent to and ratify in toto what they have been pleased to decree. Just as the Grand Monarch of France requires the Parliament of Paris to register his edicts without revision or alteration, which is necessary previous to their execution. If you are in doubt about the nature and principles of the proposed government, view the conduct of its authors and patrons. That affords the best explanation, the most striking comment. The evil genius of darkness presided at its birth. It came forth under the veil of mystery, its true features being carefully concealed, and every deceptive art has been, and is practicing to have this spurious brat received as the genuine offspring of heaven-born liberty. So fearful are its patrons that you should discern the imposition, that they have hurried on its adoption with the greatest precipitation, after so recent a triumph over British despots, after such torrents of blood and treasure have been spent, after involving ourselves in the distresses of an arduous war, and incurring such a debt for the express purpose of asserting the rights of humanity. It is truly astonishing that a set of men among ourselves should have the effrontery to attempt the destruction of our liberties. But in this enlightened age, to hope to dupe the people by the arts they are practicing is still more extraordinary. The advocates of this plan have artfully attempted to veil over the true nature and principles of it with the names of those respectable characters that by consummate cunning and address they have prevailed upon to sign it. And what ought to convince the people of the deception and excite their apprehensions is that with every advantage which education, the science of government and of law, the knowledge of history and superior talents and endowments furnish the authors and advocates of this plan with, they have from its publication exerted all their power and influence to prevent all discussion of the subject. And when this could not be prevented, they have constantly avoided the ground of argument and recurred to declamation, sophistry, and personal abuse, but principally relied upon the magic of names, emboldened by the sanction of the august name of a Washington, that they have prostituted to their purpose. They have presumed to overleap the usual gradations to absolute power, and have attempted to seize at once upon the supremacy of dominion. Sentinel. Another thing they tell us, that the Constitution must be good, from the characters which compose the convention that framed it. It is graced with the names of a Washington and a Franklin. Illustrious names, we know, worthy characters in civil society. Yet we cannot suppose them to be infallible guides. Neither yet that a man must necessarily incur guilt to himself merely by dissenting from them in opinion. We cannot think the noble general has the same ideas with ourselves, with regard to the rules of right and wrong. We cannot think he acts a very consistent part, or did through the whole of the contest with Great Britain. Notwithstanding he wielded the sword in defense of American liberty, yet at the same time was, and is to this day, living upon the labors of several hundreds of miserable Africans, as free-born as himself. And some of them very likely, descended from parents who, in point of property and dignity in their own country, might cope with any man in America. We do not conceive we are to be overborne by the weight of any names, however revered. All men are born free and equal. The Yeomanry of Massachusetts.